Hey everyone, welcome back to المشرق podcast in our fifth episode and the first to be conducted in English. We are hosting Elizabeth Loudon, a great novelist whom I read her novel recently, A Stranger in Baghdad. Elizabeth Loudon read English at Cambridge University and subsequently earned a Master in Fine Arts and Fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She has published fiction and memoir in Gettysburg Review, North American Review, Intro, and Denver Quarterly, and also poetry in numerous journals, including One Art Poetry, Blue Mountain Review, Amsterdam Review, among others. Her work has been nominated for Pushcart and Forward Prizes and longlisted for the Bridgeport Prize and Alpine Poetry Fellowship, and was included in Best New Poets 2025. Her debut novel, A Stranger in Baghdad, which is the topic of our episode today, was published in 2023 by Hopo, an imprint of the American University of Cairo Press, and won the 2024 Sharjah International Book Festival Prize for Best International Fiction. After 25 years in the US, Elizabeth returned to England and now lives in Gloucestershire. And she has enjoyed a long career in teaching and charity development alongside her creative practice, and still volunteers to build healthier and more sustainable communities. Welcome, Elizabeth. Glad to have you today with
Well,
us.
thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
The
Yeah.
pleasure is mine. Okay, so let's go to the questions. We are talking about your novel, and of all the places and historical settings available to a novelist, why did Baghdad call to you? What was the moment when you realized that this was the story you wanted to tell?
Well, there were many moments when I kept circling back to that, but it began in the 1970s. I went to Baghdad and I lived there for 6 months
Hmm.
as a guest, actually, of a British diplomatic family.
Hmm.
But I broke ranks a little bit with my compatriots, and I got to know local Iraqi students and families and spent a lot of time with them. And that included a very broad range of people in terms of background and also political affiliation. But most of my friends I was young, were quite young like me and quite challenging politically and could see the rise of Baathism in Iraq and were worried by it. And many of them also came from families that were directly affected. So, a very close friend, two close friends, in fact, had parents who were imprisoned in very bad circumstances. And a number of my friends also had one European parent, typically a mother, which was the beginning of my awareness of the complexity and challenges of Iraqi society and its relationship to the West. And especially when it came down to at the family level. I met many pluralistic families. I was very lucky. And I met families who were engaged academically, or I met the Keilani family, who
Hmm.
are strongly associated with the Great Mosque, of course, in
Yep.
Baghdad. I think you knew or knew of Lamia Keilani,
Yeah,
did
I
you?
actually wrote about her when she has
Yeah.
passed away. I wrote a piece
Hmm.
about her, yeah, and also how her legacy might like inspire young archaeologists in Iraq. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So I was lucky to know her and really connected with her again before she died in London for a while. And her family, I went to their family home, in fact, is a little bit the inspiration for the home,
Yep.
the old home on the river
Mhm.
in the book. So that was the beginning. But at the time, I wasn't thinking to write a novel. I was writing poetry, but I was also shockingly ignorant and really quite shockingly not just ignorant, but I had a lot of assumptions and bias
Mhm.
from my own upbringing as a middle class British girl.
Mhm.
And I really, it was an immersion in sort of fire almost, in my awareness got really challenged and raised while I was there.
Mhm.
When I left, I just made a simple promise to myself that I wouldn't forget and that I would keep on reflecting because I knew that I hadn't yet really discovered what I could learn from this. And I went on to live in Beirut partly during the war.
Mm,
I spent a lot of time out of Britain, and then after I got my degree, I went to the US and I
yep.
got my graduate degree there, as you mentioned. And it lay dormant within me. I published some short fiction about Baghdad and also about Beirut quite early on in the 80s. And
Mm,
then life took over and I had to work very hard full time. And I had published a little bit more, but I wasn't a productive young writer. I was
mm,
very busy and working single mom. And then the Iraq-Iran war happened after the invasion of Kuwait, and I was working in an office environment in America, and I watched how my colleagues reacted, and I was dismayed by the prejudice and the ignorance, and felt I could say nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew it would have no impact.
mhm.
And then of course 9/11 happened.
Yep.
And it was transformational and disruptive to an extraordinary degree, as we all know.
Yeah,
It was the great
that's right.
turning point. And I watched the demonstrations afterwards. I took part in one, and I'm not a politically very extrovert person. I don't join political parties. I'm an observer. But I again watched with great discomfort at America's response and the response in the West and at the tropes that were emerging about Islam and about the Middle East and about the Arab world. So at that point, I started to write.
Mm.
The
So,
very early drafts of this novel were written at that time. They roughly formed the characters of Diane and Ibrahim.
mhm.
I then left America, came back to Britain, again had to work very, very hard. But I would peck at the novel when I had time. And eventually, about 10 years ago, I started to clear a bit more time because I was getting old and I time was running out. So it'd been a very long simmering project. And I had been writing professionally through all this and writing other things and living a very challenging and
Mm.
very
So
rich life too in
how
many
long did
ways.
it take you for you to finish it?
Well, from start to finish, the whole
Yep.
process spanned 20 years, but the amount of time spent writing on the book, probably three,
I see. Mm,
but spread out and scattered. So I started doing serious research at around that time because all of the questions you sent me, I was facing about what right did I have to tell a story?
mhm.
I had the issue of cultural appropriation became enormous. It's almost been superseded, I think, by concerns about AI now in
Yeah.
literature. But
Yeah. Mm,
which is now the things change and move so fast. But of course, I saw better known writers than I and younger writers getting into real trouble over these issues.
mm,
I had my own private view, which is that any writer should be free to try
of
anything they
course.
want, and
Mm,
anyone can judge it how they want, but it's a free world for artists, and that's the point of being an artist. But I knew that I was going to have to work hard, so I spent a lot of time on the research, first of all. I didn't learn Arabic very much. I learned a little bit, and I had a dictionary with me all the time. And some of the materials, language materials I turned to, actually, I think were from the CIA. They were the best I could find. But I took some Arabic lessons privately, and I endeavored to learn about the language,
mm. Yeah,
how it's
that will be
constructed, what
discussed.
the
Yeah.
grammar is, how
Mhm,
words are formed. I learned proverbs. I learned basic vocabulary.
mhm.
And beyond that, I went to archives. St. Anthony's College in Oxford has the great archive. So I started to be able to read original letters from Faisal to his actual nanny, the
Mm,
king. I found a lot of letters from the ambassadors at the time. There's a couple of quotes in the novel that are lifted actually directly out of the correspondence, not very many. And I started to read a lot in the background. So I amassed a little library of books about the history of Baghdad, some by Iraqi sociologists, Iraqi authors, contemporary and earlier 20th century, and then others by Westerners.
mhm.
Jan Morris wrote a book on the Hashemite Kingdoms, the Dynasty was actually quite a good book, a bit racy, a bit superficial, as Jan Morris could be. It was then James Morris, but an interesting book. And I also read some amazing accounts by Jewish Iraqis in exile who've written some beautiful memoirs that I found to be so evocative and evoking to that pluralistic period of early 20th century Baghdad when the population was so diverse and so
Diverse.
much more integrated. And so they were quite eye-opening and incredible. I spoke with Iraqi diaspora in London. I tracked down old friends that I'd had in Baghdad and went back and talked to them.
Mhm.
Lamia, whom we've talked about, the great archaeologist, for any of your listeners who don't know, Lamia Gilani, where was the name of her second husband, but she said Lamia al-Gilani.
Yep.
She was a great archaeologist, of course, at the museum at Baghdad. And I fell afoul of Saddam Hussein and took us off to London after she was demoted, and then had a post at the British Museum. And she was very courageous. She went back to Iraq in
Yep.
many years, many times before she died, and was amassing the correspondence of Gertrude Bell that was completely uncatalogued in the basement of the museum in Baghdad. And she was also founding a museum in Basra, as I am sure you know,
Yeah, yeah, that's
to
right.
repatriate artifacts from Iraq and to tell the story of Iraq. And in fact, she died on a journey home to
Mm.
Basra,
Yeah.
very tragically.
Mm.
And I will cry. I still remember the day an Iraqi friend came to my house and told me she was dead.
Mhm.
So I had Iraqi friends who were mostly from families very similar to the one in the novel.
Mhm.
So influential families where the women were educated as well as the men, which
Yeah.
was a striking feature at Baghdad, of course, that
Yeah, we will
many women
discuss this, of course.
engineers, many
Yeah.
women architects, as well as doctors of all
Mhm.
sorts. And my friends were, architects, engineers,
Mhm.
artists, doctors.
Mhm.
So I haven't named all of them in the book in my acknowledgements or publicly, but there's not a huge number, but they were incredibly precious to me. And Lamia was amazing. And if I wanted to describe a meal on the book, she would cook me the meal. So I felt that when I was with people, and I also interviewed people who'd been in prison and been tortured, and it was very traumatic
Mhm.
for all of us, for me too. And I realized that in fact, you need to be trained as a therapist to do that work.
Mm. Yeah,
There's a
that's right.
reason, one of my clients in the charity world was the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture, as it was then known.
Mhm.
And I had great respect for their physicians and their therapists. I worked with
Mm.
them in a completely different role professionally.
Mhm.
But then when I found myself talking to people who had been imprisoned and had really suffered or lost family members, it was quite disturbing. And I had to think again about my right and my position to write the book. So I had written the story from all the main characters' points of view in a struggle to find out how to tell the story,
Mhm.
what the story was, how to tell it. And I had at some points written it from Ibrahim's point of view and from
Yep.
Ziad's point of
Mhm.
view, and also even from Layla, who's
Later.
slightly based on Lamia a little bit.
Mhm.
And I felt as I did that I loved getting to know my characters in that way, but that I didn't have the right to inhabit a fully Iraqi point of view. So
Mhm.
the two points of view that are interwoven through the novel or sort of put together are Diane's really, and of course she's
Yep.
British like me,
Mhm.
and Mona, her daughter, who
The
is
daughter.
half
Mhm. Half Iraqi, half
Iraqi, half
British. Yeah.
British, and well anglicized.
Mhm.
And I hoped that that would be respectful and authentic enough.
Mhm.
I was very, very worried that people would criticize
No, I
me
really
upon
enjoyed
my,
the book. Yeah,
but
and have
actually, no Iraqi has done so.
uh,
And um, I'm sorry, chattering on, but you asked
yeah,
me a brilliant question about,
yeah,
which readers mean the most to me. Without a doubt, the Iraqi
yeah.
readers.
We will go through this now.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I that's a sort of background. So I went through
yeah,
this long process of
yeah.
sort of exploration and research and
Mhm.
conversations and sitting in the British Library looking at old maps of
Mhm.
Baghdad was immensely helpful and moving. I mean, the World War One maps that where a general had written on them which bridges
Mm,
could bear the weight of a tank,
mm,
and to touch that
okay.
and see the document itself that was behind,
Mm,
that earlier period of more famous period, actually, the
yeah.
Gertrude Bell era. So yeah, it was a real immersion. It became my great private world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Long
interesting.
answer. I'll be
So,
quiet now.
was it difficult to find a publisher for a work written on another place? Like, sometimes they deal with the stories or novels written on other places as exotic works, just like examples to know other
Mm,
places, and not like
mm.
real fiction. Have you faced such challenges?
I'm sure I did. I started approaching agents and I had some interest, but nobody took it.
Hmm.
And like all writers with their punting a book, I had a little spreadsheet and, would send it out and do this and do that. And then I decided that given the very particular subject matter, that there were really only going to be three publishers I identified. And the first, I've gone blank on the name, they're on Queensway in London. They had a bookshop. Um, I didn't write the name down in my notes, and
Okay.
I've just it's the Arabic bookshop in London, and
Okay.
they also had a publishing company that was with a very famous his name was Naeem Atala, a very famous Palestinian editor-in-chief who's died,
Mm,
and the assistant editor wanted to take the book, and he said, "I think she should be writing it as nonfiction," and life is
mm,
not nonfiction.
mhm,
Um, but so I missed on them. And then the other two, one is, I'm sure you know, at Syracuse in America, the University of New York and Syracuse campus
mhm.
has I think Andrew Simon may be associated with, I may be based there. I think do you know Andrew Simon, who
No.
writes about pop culture in Arabic culture
Oh
and
yeah,
music.
I'm not sure if he is like he wrote something about Egypt and the cassettes
Yes.
thing. Yeah,
He
yeah, yeah,
writes about Egypt
yeah,
society,
yeah,
Egypt pop music, Egypt cafe society,
yeah,
cassette
yeah.
music,
Yeah, he's
record
he's a
shops,
friend of
that
mine
whole
on
kind of
Facebook.
scene.
Yeah. Mm,
And I wrote to him and he helped me identify a couple of reviewers. I
mm,
think he's at Syracuse. They have, I might be wrong, but they have a press that focuses on literature about the Middle East. And then the other one was Hupo with
mhm.
AUC, American University of Cairo.
Yeah.
And I went to them second, and there was a deafening silence. And the main acquisition editor was, I think, at the time on maternity leave. So they had a substitute and a retired gentleman who was really lovely,
Hmm.
but was not perhaps, looking quite as fast. And I finally wrote and said, if you could just tell me that you don't want it, that would
Hmm.
be put me out
Yeah,
of my
helpful.
misery.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, no, no, we're going to talk about it at the board meeting in December.
Mm.
So this was in
2.
2022
Hmm.
or even 2021.
Okay.
And it was a long time ago. And
Yeah.
it was more or less the novel that's published now, but it was still a bit of a draft. It needed a bit of polishing. And
Hmm.
so I sat through all of December with increasingly depressed and unhappy. And so in January, I actually sent an email to him and said, well, I'm assuming the board has met and decided not to acquire this book. And, if you could confirm. And he said, oh, your timing's incredible. We had the meeting was delayed. It happened this morning. And there was a unanimous and very enthusiastic vote to acquire this.
Hmm.
And after all these years, Gilgamesh, I was sitting downstairs in this house with my husband, and he didn't know I was reading these emails. He just was
Hmm.
sitting there. And
Okay.
I got off my chair and lay on the floor. And he said, what are you doing? I was just so overcome. I said, I can't believe it. I've sold my book.
Okay, that's so interesting.
I
Mm.
mean, sell is, there's not big money in a university press, but I said, I've sold my work.
Yeah.
And it was, it's a wonderful feeling after you've
Hmm.
worked hard.
Of
And
course.
then,
Mm.
and then it was an amazing relationship. I have so much praise for Nadia Nakib, who was actually the acquisitions editor. And then there was a editor who worked on the text who since left to go back to teaching,
Hmm.
and she had an Iraqi family. I think I mentioned to you, she sent the text to her family,
Yeah.
and they would say things like, no, 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 that biscuit isn't made that way. And I had one or two slight cultural gaffes in that I'd sort of misunderstood issues about status and who would do housework or who would
Mm.
welcome a guest in what way,
Okay.
and they corrected them. And
Mm.
and I am not a defensive writer at all. There are writers who don't like feedback or being corrected, but I've always been a professional writer and I've always worked with teams and with clients. So for me, it's fine.
Yeah,
There's
actually,
nothing.
actually, the effort was very evident in the book. Like I noticed that it has been written from someone who has lived in Iraq for a long time. Like, yeah, there were very few notes to say there is some inaccuracies. Most of the work was very brilliant, actually, and this
I
is not
really wanted
a
it to
compliment.
be. I would worry about details like were there traffic lights in Baghdad in
Yeah.
1938 or something when Diana arrives.
Mm,
I spent a lot of time looking at the infrastructure of the city, the
mm,
bridges, the roads,
mm,
the public health system, sanitation, like very mundane things,
mm,
because those things create our life. I mean, how I live here
mm,
in this town, how I
mm,
live in London is created a lot by the quality of a sidewalk or a
mm.
street or whether there's lighting. And you can't
Yeah,
put all that in a novel. But I could remember Baghdad because I'd been there, but I wanted that feel of the city.
of course.
And I knew it would only be a very rough approximation. I'm not a native, but
Mm,
I wanted to do my best, is all I
yeah.
can say.
Mhm. Okay, so when it comes to historical fiction, it often balances documentation with imagination. How did you decide where historical evidence ended and fiction began? Like, for example, you made Diane connected to the royal family, and then also her
Mhm.
husband was in connection with the general, who's mostly Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. I
although
decided not
he's
to
not
name him.
mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah.
not
I
been
just
mentioned.
decided not to name him because he
Yeah,
wasn't the president technically quite, but
yeah.
he had all the power.
So how
Um,
did you decide on this? Like,
well, one of the other inspirations for the novel I didn't mention was a privately printed memoir by the nanny to Faisal, who
mhm,
actually left to marry a British guy. She was recruited in as an emergency and she went out to Baghdad and she also then went on to be a nanny to a Raj in India. I can't remember who. And there's a little memoir that she published for her family. And
mhm,
I came across it in a secondhand bookshop and I did everything I could to find the family and I didn't. But it's not her story, but it gave me a grounding in historical fact. And
mhm,
then I thought I want to be accurate about the Prime Minister Nuri Said, especially who's a great, influential Machiavellian
mhm.
person,
Yeah,
always pulling strings and died of terror. And these people came to terrible ends, of course, and of course the rise of Saddam Hussein and the some of those tensions, say, between the military and the unions in Iraq. And I wanted to have it anchored in history, but then be able to be quite free in developing this family. The family are an imagined family. They are not based on any particular family,
okay. Mhm,
except that I'm from a medical family, so I understand medical families
mhm.
quite well.
No,
But they're very much imagined characters. So I think you just want to feel that you've got this imaginary world and that you've got enough real detail that for you at least it feels authentic, you hope for the reader, and then you are free. I could have her run
yeah,
across town at night in a car or not, or go to a nightclub or not. I didn't,
yeah.
yeah. But
Actually,
the
you
nightclub
have
is
touched
based
on.
on a real
Mhm,
nightclub, and the bookshop says, Almaty Street is a real street. So I tried to have it anchored.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but
actually,
then,
actually, you gave me like for a person who was born in Baghdad, you gave me the impression of living by the Tigris, an experience I haven't, for example, lived myself. But yeah, you gave me
yeah,
such things, and this is a very huge success, I think. Yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I tried to call on my memory too, but I think I live in books so much. I ended up
yeah.
reading so much and talking to and looking at photographs. And Iraq has had a few exceptional photographers.
Hmm.
There's a famous one, Latif
The Ani. The
Al-Ani,
Ani.
thank you,
Yeah,
Latif
yeah.
Ani.
Hmm.
And I looked at his photographs until my eyes were glazing over. I mean, what extraordinary pictures. I wanted one for the cover of the book. The other person whose photography is mostly architectural, but
Hmm.
I happened to see his private collection was Rifat Chadirchi.
That's it.
And the Rifat Chadirchi was after Zaha Hadid, the greatest architect, as you may know
Hmm.
from Iraq.
Yep.
And he died sadly of COVID. He did
Yeah.
have
Mm.
dementia or Parkinson's.
And
I
he
got
got
to
COVID,
meet
I
him.
think. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and then he had COVID and his I met his wife Bolkis. And I actually then I wanted a photograph he had taken of Bolkis reading in their house in Baghdad on the cover of the book. But the license was quite expensive, so it ended up with the cover it has. But Rifat, in addition to his architectural photography, because he was so influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright and helped to make Baghdad quite a modernist city
Yep.
in many ways. He also risked his life in the 70s doing a lot of street photography when you
Hmm.
couldn't walk around with a Kodak Instamatic very
Yep.
easily. And I went to a private showing of those and then went to his house. And he also had a house, again, like the house in the novel. And he actually, I have it in one of the boxes behind me.
Mm.
He drew by hand the layout of his house and told me how they moved around it.
Mm.
And I don't think when I talked with people like that who are so distinguished, who are truly the elite of
Mm.
Iraqi society, I don't think they were looking at me thinking, this is a wonderful writer. I must help her, by the way, because I
Yeah.
am nobody. But I think they were very touched to be asked.
Mm. I see. Mm.
Because Lamia, who was a cousin, distant cousin of Rifat, people like Lamia and Rifat had so illustrious and educated and influential. And then you're an emigre in London, and even if you're doing all right, with all again, those terrible reductive
Hmm.
assumptions about the Arab world that have taken hold and all the wars, people were not asking them about this.
Yeah, that's right. I
Mhm.
think all like foreigners or immigrants sometimes love to be asked about what their lives look
Mhm.
like. And yeah, just
Yeah,
this curiosity makes them happy to talk.
yeah.
Sometimes I think
And
they miss talking about things that matters to them. Hmm.
yeah, and it was really moving for me always. There was
Mm.
another gentleman I interviewed who had been in the prison and tortured and the prison mentioned in the Kazan here in the book. And it was a difficult time with him for me because it was painful, but I'm not sure I mean he's poor, this one.
Hmm.
He lives near Heathrow in a poor neighborhood. I'm not sure anyone's ever walked into his house and asked him,
Mm.
what happened to you?
Yeah,
What's
that's
happened to your marriage? What happened to your children?
mm.
Because people's families were devastated as
Yep.
well.
Hmm.
And the children carry the pain and the legacy as well, of course.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah. So,
So,
yeah.
you mentioned that you have lived in Iraq for like a couple of months, and
6 months, six
yeah,
months.
6 months. Yeah. Was
I
there a
want to think
part?
every month.
Yeah. Was there a particular experience or place that stayed with you while writing the novel?
Um, While I was there initially, we went to the Alvia Club quite a bit, which is a kind of, where all the expats go. But I think you had asked you asked me at one point where I would go back to, and I just think along the river, of course, Abu Nawas, and then Watanabe Street to the bookshops. And I would love to go to a cafe, the famous cafes,
Tabende?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Some of
Okay.
that. I mean, I would just like to go. I know I'm a woman. I don't speak Arabic. I'm not sure how much headway I'd make, but I'd love to. I like hanging out in
Hmm.
cafes and watching people. I'm very comfortable talking to strangers. I
Hmm.
can go into a pub and chat to anybody in England. So I think I would like to just go and hunker down, yeah, in the cafe on Watanabe Street and
Mm.
talk to some aged poet and talk about poetry. And
Okay.
yeah. The
So,
other place I went to was the marshes, and I have published a piece about, I published about that. And
mhm.
I had that in the novel. I took it out. Didn't fit. But I had an amazing, but I wouldn't go back because it would break my heart.
I see. I think so, unfortunately.
Yeah, it would break my heart. It has not been restored, no matter what people say.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, as a British novelist writing Iraqi characters, did you ever feel special responsibility or hesitation about representing a culture that is not your own? Like, yeah, I told you that I have experienced this because my first drafts when I was like a
Mm.
teenager were about England, and that was because I was reading about England a lot, like many detective novels by
Yeah.
Arthur Conan
Mhm.
Doyle and Agatha
Mhm.
Christie and others. So I found myself writing such novels without because this is where I get
It's
inspired
where you
from.
are in your
Yeah,
imagination. And
yeah, that's
I
right.
mean, it's almost like people, I don't read or write science fiction, but
Mhm,
I understand that impulse to create an alternative world. Like you take the materials of what you know and your
mhm,
life, and then you create another world.
mhm,
And people like you and me who love, love, love books and who live in our imaginations,
mhm,
we're always going to do that. We are always going to wonder what it's like to be another person or what another world is like. And so that part of it was natural and easy for me. But as I said, I was very, very, very concerned. I do want to mention I was on a little bit of a mission, and again, I have no grand ideas about my status in the world of literary fiction, but there has been a great deal of literature written fiction about the East, about more about India.
mhm,
So when I was a very young woman, I was incredibly taken with Paul Scott's novels,
mhm.
especially the little ones, Staying On, the little standalone, but all of them, that panorama of fading colonial life. And then there are so many. There's Graham Greene, there's Paul Scott. I always keep a list for these conversations.
Mhm.
And I'm just glancing over my list here. Michael Ondaatje, The English Patient, even also I thought
Mhm.
was an absolute
Mhm.
masterpiece, and I loved the film. But what I was seeing when I started writing again seriously about 10 years ago, still part-time, but I rejoined actually because I had belonged when I was 18 or 19,
Mhm.
the Arab British Library in London, which is next to the Samuel Johnson House, if you know it, in Gough Square. And it's
Okay.
this, actually, I don't know if you know the library, but it's a
No,
fantastic
unfortunately.
library.
Yeah.
And it's home of Banipal, which is the magazine,
Mhm.
which has the editor of that was a woman married to an Iraqi writer. So it's a very I would go there and I would just read and read and read. But I was reading a lot of Iraqi fiction in translation, and there's been quite a renaissance and explosion. But what I noticed, understandably, is the fiction is very, very different than our sort of literary canon of, a character-based sort of deep delve, a lot about marriage, a lot about
Mm.
family life.
Yeah.
Um, it's more about the trauma and the wars, and it's fairly dystopian, and it's an extraordinary literature, and it's a
Mhm.
necessary literature. But I wondered what would happen if I took the tools I know of straightforward literary fiction, which looks at, very typically a marriage
Mm.
and what
Okay.
happens to a family. It's a very standard subject. It's like a lot of American literature is about that.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
applied that perspective and that way of writing to an Iraqi subject because Western readers have never read. They've read Paul Scott. They've read about India.
Mhm.
British writers there's a wealth, and even about Malaysia and about China. There's a wealth of literature
Yeah.
by British writers and by writers from those countries in translation, but there wasn't anything at all to point them to
Mhm.
show the Baghdad I had just glimpsed. I mean, I just touched it. And I thought, what if I tried to create that? Because at the same time, there's been such a hardening of attitude against the Arab world and against the Middle East and the constant wars, and it's just associated with wars and then a very oppressive distortion of Islam.
Mhm.
And then there were the stories of the child brides who, got on the
Yeah.
planes and
Yeah.
and then there's, and then more recently there's been the horror of Gaza and so forth. So all we're seeing is devastation,
Mhm.
violence, oppression,
Yep.
things that are deeply reductive as well as aggressive, that are the
Mhm.
most terrible side of humanity. what I had seen in Baghdad, I had seen some of that. I had felt it
Of
in
course.
the rise of the fashion of the party, but
Hmm.
I also saw extraordinary, um, sort of wisdom and kindness and a pluralistic society and, curiosity and openness and all the things that all of us might value together. So
Hmm.
I thought, well, what if I shared some of that in a format that Western readers can pick up and read?
Hmm.
And many, many, many British readers in book clubs and people who've got in touch with me have said, "Oh, I felt I just learned so much. I learned so much. I learned so much." And I'm glad to hear that, but I'm also a little bit sad sometimes, partly because they've started from, and people still confuse it with Iran.
Mm. Yeah,
They'll
that's
say,
always the
"Have you
case.
read?" The people often say, "Have." Well, of course, and then have you read Reading Lolita in Tehran? And I say, "Well, I have, as a matter of fact, but just to clarify,
Mm.
Iran and Iraq, I know they've got
Two
the same
different
history,
nations. Yeah.
but it couldn't be more different countries."
Yes, that's
And
right.
and then people go, "Oh, yes," and I think, my goodness, our countries have invaded and destroyed some of these regions, and
Yeah,
people
I
still don't
always get
know it.
asked about the same thing here in Istanbul. Yeah, so I know
Yes,
the
yeah.
feeling. You have mentioned that British literature has a long history of portraying the Middle East and India and others. And I have noticed from my readings that mostly it depicts these places through diplomats, archaeologists, and colonial officials. Like I have read, for example, George Orwell's Burmese Days recently. I enjoyed that very
Mm,
much. Yeah, it is one of the examples of such novels. But your novel also inhabits that world, but there is a difference in that. Were you consciously engaging with that literary tradition or challenging it, like by choosing an here there is a marriage, which is very different from others. Of course, there is a diplomat, there is the embassy, there is the
mm.
archaeologist, but there is also a special touch in your novel. Mhm.
Well, the family in my novel, of course, are kind of upper middle class professional and elite. I certainly would not have been able to represent, say, a working class Shia family
Mhm.
out in a small town. So I wasn't consciously challenging those characteristic perspectives in Western fiction,
Mhm.
but I was really hoping that the marriage and Diane's struggles with the marriage too,
Mhm.
and Ibrahim's would just feel real,
Mhm.
like people anybody could meet. I did obviously create diplomatic characters and Duncan's character,
Yep.
which some people have had issues with his character, which has just interested me. I
Mhm.
actually kind of liked his character. I was a bit silly.
Okay.
I
Mhm.
don't like him, but I liked creating him.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to show some of the slippery qualities and the evasiveness and the recklessness, in a sense, sometimes of the diplomatic community, in
Mhm.
that they would always put their interests first, and of course their country's interests first, and the cost could be
Of
very
course.
high.
Mhm.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is how this is life. This is how it is.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have them there, but be scrutinized a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Many readers will probably be surprised by your depiction of Baghdad as a cosmopolitan city where Muslims, Christians, Jews, Europeans, and people of different beliefs interact quite normally. How important was it for you to recover that forgotten image of Iraq? And actually, you depicted it from the very beginning of the novel when you mentioned her arrival into Basra and she met the Jews on the streets. Yeah, so it was from the beginning that this is a diverse city and
Yes,
country.
and she sees Africans, a
Yeah,
form of
that's right.
slave,
Yep.
when she
Hmm.
arrives.
Yeah.
And then I was very careful to include a Jewish family, their
Hmm.
friends, who
Yeah.
disappear.
Hmm.
Um, One of my favorite things in doing readings or meeting with book groups here in Britain is to ask people first to guess what the percentage of population of Baghdad they think was Jewish
Hmm.
before World War II, between World War One and World War II. There's not actually very good data on this. I did
Hmm.
do quite a bit of looking, but we can safely say 20 to 30%.
Hmm.
Then I asked them to guess how many declared Jewish Iraqis there are. now in Baghdad? And the answer is 13. I'm
Mm.
probably now 10.
Yeah.
There's an extraordinary film about an Iraqi Jewish man from London going back, a documentary, to find his home.
Okay.
And I recommend called Remembering Baghdad, made by, interestingly, a psychotherapist from Ireland. So she grew up with the Troubles and then she did this. It's something I recommend to people.
Hmm.
I definitely was on a bit of a mission. And I think that having a mission, having a fire, something you're angry about a little bit helps you because writing, as you know, is very lonely and very hard.
Yeah.
And you spend a lot of time with your self-doubt and a lot of time thinking you're wasting time.
Yes, that's
So I
right.
had this kind of missionary zeal, but
Mm.
not missionary, to show this and for people to know that you can have all of this and it can go.
Hmm. Yeah,
It
that's
can
right.
be destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. Um,
Yeah.
the novel also presents an Iraq where people drink alcohol, debate politics, marry across religious lines, and include both believers and atheists. Layla was kind of an atheist. How
Hmm.
historically representative was that society? Were you portraying Baghdad generally, or mainly a particularly educated social class?
I would imagine again my own friendships and my own exposures were definitely to the elite, more elite people.
Hmm.
Um, there's an example of I love to share with people though because it's a familiar name here. I don't know if you know the scientist Jim Khalili who does
Hmm.
science broadcasting on the BBC. His father was Iraqi Shia
Hmm.
from Najaf.
Najaf, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
his mother was British, and they were
Hmm.
much more typical of Iraqi Anglo-Iraqi marriage in that his dad went to Britain to study engineering in the 60s, so
Hmm.
later than my novel. And she was the front desk librarian in the town, and they fell in love, and he brought her back. And so they were much more. I mean, he wasn't working class. He was working. He was a manager in a factory, and he wouldn't join the bath parties, so they had to leave
Hmm.
eventually. So there are many families like that that I didn't really know so well, although I interviewed Jim Khalili's parents at length before they died. And I knew I couldn't do it all, that I was going to have to stay in the confines. Because again, I'm not neither talented enough nor knowledgeable enough of this one sort of family from a world more familiar to me.
Hmm.
But I do think that in that world, people definitely were drinking alcohol and disavowing religion. And I was also very struck that there wasn't much Sunni Shia tension among my friends. A little bit, just enough, I think, that someone could like take a match and light the fire, a
Okay.
little bit, but not much.
Hmm. Yeah,
Not
that's
much.
very interesting
Yeah.
because yeah, it is quite different recent
Mhm.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I haven't been to Iraq like since to 2009, so that has been a
Yeah.
long time. Yeah, but I can sense that from social media. I know it's not representative, but yeah, we can have a glimpse of what's going on. Yeah.
Mhm.
How did you approach Arabic during your research? Like you even described Arabic in a very interesting way, and there is a sentence I
Yeah.
have quoted it somewhere, and
Yeah.
yeah, and also it was like highlighting the differences between how the Arabic and English deals with things.
Mm.
Did
Well,
learning Iraqi expressions or Arabic sources change the way your character spoke or thought? For example, you always say la no when you
yeah.
yeah yeah la no.
I would love to say that it did. I don't know that my knowledge was deep enough for that sort of transformative creation of a character's way of thinking. I mean, you are the translator, so you are bilingual, and
Yeah,
both languages are a home for you, and you're very lucky. You
yeah,
have two homes. I only have one,
yeah.
although I speak several languages okay. But as I think I said, I did go for some private lessons, and then I just got hold of lots of grammar guides and dictionaries,
Mm,
and I would just sit and read them. And I listened. I used to ride the buses in London and listened to people speaking Arabic, or I used to go to Edgware Road and go to the restaurants and
Okay.
just listen. And then
Uh,
sometimes I would test myself. I still do it sometimes. I'll say, "You're speaking Arabic. Can I just test my accent awareness? Are you Egyptian or are you Iraqi? You
mm,
know, 'cause they're so
mm.
different."
Yeah, of course.
So I just tried to be aware, but I knew that I was very worried about it. And I was very worried about the fact the dialogue all had to be in English. And I almost stopped writing the novel. I was so worried. And then I thought, well, I've got this far. I might as well just finish. But I felt that it was a tremendous, I mean, I don't think that I accomplished anything brilliant on this front at all. Again, you can only do your best. And
No, actually, I like the way you introduced certain
yeah,
Iraqi vocabs in the novel.
thank
That
you.
was very interesting to me.
Yeah, I learned a
Yeah,
little bit. Yeah,
yeah, that's very
yeah.
interesting. So this has been tackled, but we will talk about it. Today, many people in the West associate Iraq and maybe most of the Arab world almost exclusively with war and
Mm,
instability. Did you
mm.
consciously want readers to discover an Iraq that was once attractive enough for foreigners to build careers, friendships, and even families there? Although I have noticed that many foreigners dislike to have or to build a family in the Arab world. I have noticed that in for example,
Mm.
a Chilean novel. Also about Baghdad in the 1950s, and it is about
Really?
like yeah, it's the correspondences between like an artist who is from the indigenous people
Mm.
in Chile, and I think a Polish Jewish woman, his wife, and they
Mm.
lived there because he was teaching music and ballet at Baghdad in the 50s, but they were not like willing
I
to,
have not
yeah,
heard of this
yeah,
incredible novel.
yeah, that
This
was
you've just mentioned an amazing, like a salad, like an amazing mixture of culture
yeah.
and interest.
And
And how did you?
actually, they got separated later on because the artist got associated with the Kurdish issue, and he supported the Kurds, and he left his wife because he fell in love with an Iraqi Kurd woman. So yeah, but
Goodness.
yeah, but his wife wasn't willing to like settle down in Iraq. She said, "No, we will not have children here." So yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
want to challenge such
I created a character in Diane who
mhm,
would not have wanted to go home.
mhm,
And I created a slightly ambivalent character, or a character who's not entirely likable. So she, there are a couple of things here I want to say. The first is that she's not entirely likable, and she sort of wanted to stay because she felt she had power, and then
mhm,
she lost it.
mhm,
She had power because she was Western and she was beautiful, and she was married to an elite doctor.
mhm,
So I think that there has always been a history of women, I mean, Freya Stark and so forth, who have Gertrude Bell and other. Freya Stark is a wonderful writer too, of course, about Baghdad, and I
mhm,
read everything she wrote. But women who go right into the back into the 18th century and take husbands from other cultures and
mhm,
become they found clubs and they become elite. There is one woman you may have heard of, and she's not the basis for the character, and her story is terrible, but Margaret Hassan. Do you know
mhm.
who she
Yeah, I know
is?
her. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she has
Yeah.
been
I
killed
had
and
her a
something.
little in mind. I mean, a terrible end. After she was kidnapped and killed, her mother-in-law, her Iraqi mother-in-law, said, I loved her as if she was my own daughter.
Mhm,
And she was absolutely beloved, as you know. She was a great example of something I think British women can do very well when they set their mind to it. Maybe I shouldn't generalize and say British, maybe
mhm,
anyone can do it. But, we can be quite intrepid and go forth and integrate and with lots of blinkers and blind spots and conflict, internal conflict and external might be around that, but we will go forth and we will, go into the Hindu Kush or go into Latin America or go into Baghdad
mhm.
and take this on. And I think that that's actually quite a common theme.
Hmm.
So, but it's not, you're quite right. Of course, many women just say, I want out of here,
Yeah. Yeah,
especially once the Ba'ath Party was coming to power.
of course. Yeah. What would you mean the most to you? Praise from British readers who discovered an unfamiliar Iraq, or acceptance from Iraqi readers who feel you portrayed part of their history honestly?
Yeah, I think I said that's what we would say in America is a slam dunk question. I, I wrote this entirely terrified of what Iraqi readers would say, and I was absolutely relieved that I didn't get completely eviscerated for being both arrogant and inaccurate. The character of Ziad is actually quite closely based in a way on a friend of mine whom I can't identify, who's alive, but who's suffered terribly and who's a great creative person in their field. And he actually wrote and said, I love you for writing this book. And actually, you remember Baghdad better than I do.
Mm.
Now, I don't. It was just recreated, but that was the best feedback I ever got. He didn't put that, it wasn't on Amazon or Goodreads. It wasn't,
Mhm.
you know, there's nothing public about this, but um yeah, we're still in touch. And I'm sure that I have Iraqi friends or acquaintances who took issue with it.
Mm.
They've been very gracious. Nobody has told me that they think I was inaccurate or
Yeah.
wrong.
Uh, yeah.
Well, they may very well have thought all sorts of things or just not liked it. I mean, not all readers like this book.
Mhm.
Um, by and large, people have been pretty warm about it.
Mhm.
It's quite a long book. It's got two points of view. It's quite historical, and I like historical work myself,
Mhm.
but it's nice when British readers like it, but I say I always have that little tinge of sadness. Like I really want Iraqi readers to like it. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So now to our closing questions, and I have enjoyed this discussion too much.
Thank you
And
for all
yeah,
the time you've given me. You've been very generous. As I
thank-
said, I love to chat.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So after spending years immersed in this world, what do you hope in the one idea or image of Iraq that stays
Mm.
with readers long after they finish A Stranger in Baghdad?
Mm. I would like them to remember. There's a scene I wrote in the book that I rewrote 100 times, it's towards the end now, where there's a dinner in the old house.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like people to have that feeling of noisy, argumentative, emotional family
Mm-hmm.
with balconies looking over the river at night and sitting out on the balcony and, you know, having a cigarette, having a glass of something, whatever. And someone's yelling in the background and someone's having an argument and the children are bored, but it's life. And that Baghdad had people who could put their feet up on the balcony and, you know, yell, hey, come out here. And you know what your mother just said. You know, just the whole sort of noisy, lovely
Mm-hmm.
life of a
Okay.
family in a warm, hot environment with, you know, balconies and open windows
Mhm.
and to know that that was what belonged to people. That was how they lived. And um yeah, that it's very precious. We don't know how it is until we've lost it, do we?
Yeah,
If we
that's
lose
right.
a family or a home, we might complain about it or think it's boring or have a big argument with an uncle or something. And then when it's
Mhm.
gone, it's gone.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And so, if you could spend one day in
Mm.
the Baghdad of your novel, where would you go first?
Yeah, I think I said, I think I would
Yeah.
stroll along Abu Nawas and I would go to Mutanabi Street.
Okay.
Um, you know, a building I didn't get to know well was actually the old university
Also,
buildings.
Massaria.
Yeah, and Mustansaria. I would love to walk quietly around Mustansaria and talk with the faculty there too about what they've been through, especially in the humanities.
Mhm.
And I spent much of my life in education in the university sector, so
Okay.
yeah, that would be special. I didn't go there I was very stupid when I was 18. I didn't make
No.
very good use of my time. I just went to the nightclubs and went
Okay.
for joyrides. But yeah, that would be very great privilege. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for this lovely discussion
Well,
and
thank
hope to
you.
see this book in Arabic one day.
Well, you just mentioned that to my publishers and see if you can tweet
Yeah.
them. I would also love to see it in Arabic one
Yeah.
day. And let's talk again soon. We have
For
lots
sure.
to chat
Let's
about.
keep in
Okay.
touch. Nice to meet
Okay. Take
you.
care. Lovely. Have a lovely evening. Bye
You
bye.
too. Goodbye.